So does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
When do rites and rituals, like the Buddha said, that is an attachments, but
Right.
are they more wholesome?
Right.
I struggle with the difference sometimes.
Yep, okay. So the things that a stream enterer abandons, one of them is attachment to rites and rituals, or the way I understand it is believing that the rites and rituals will liberate you. So we do rites and rituals if the ceremony is helpful to generate mindfulness. If you can use a ceremony to generate mindfulness, bowing, one generates mindfulness while bowing, chanting, that's a Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, Sanghanusati. You're recollecting meditation objects that are recommended by Lord Buddha. In terms of increasing efforts, you're increasing your effort to meditate more, forcing yourself to meditate more. You're doing activities that cause more clarity, more presence of mind, more truth-discerning awareness. So it's not something that leads away from. It's not superstitious. It's something that supports cultivation of path factors. So when people do things like I do this a lot in my own practice of make aspirations, then it's always about doing a practice that helps to generate more clarity. And if you're more consistent in your mindfulness and more diligent in your effort, it gives rise to energy. And then when you have consistent mindfulness and energy, that becomes samadhi. And when you have samadhi, you're more inclined to develop insight because you have a more steady and stable mind. So the difference is, it's not like if I was to think, when I finish 5,000 hours under the Bodhi tree, I'll be an arahant. That's misunderstanding. If, while in the process of meditating for 5,000 hours, I develop more mindfulness, more concentration, have more stability of mind, I may develop significant insight. But it's about laying the causes. But so one understands the law of karma. Lord Buddha said we shouldn't criticize people doing things for the sake of merit, because merit is a support. So if we want to do something just because we know it will create merit, it's actually not unwholesome. It's not the highest aspiration, but it's not an unwholesome one, and Lord Buddha said not to criticize it, because it's synonymous with happiness. Punya, in Buddha's own words, is synonymous with happiness. So suppose one wanted to offer flowers every day. If you think that offering flowers will get you enlightened, that's wrong. But if you offer the flowers because you do feel loving, grateful respect to the Buddha and you want to offer something beautiful, and when you're offering it, you're thinking of Lord Buddha with gratitude, the mind state is meritorious, the offering is meritorious, and when a mind that has merit is what brightens a mind. So minds that have little merit tend to be dark, and minds that have more merit tend to be bright. They're not necessarily clear, so you can have a bright mind without much clarity. But the brightness clarity can be brought to that brightness. But it's very difficult to bring clarity to darkness. So the brightness is the foundation. What normally happens, or at least how my teachers have explained it, if a person develops potent, skillful, auspicious merits, at a certain point their mind will become more interested in peace, just naturally, as a result of the merit. It's because when the mind brightens up, it gets kind of disinterested or kind of disgusted with darkness. It's glimpsed something better. It's almost like smelt something better, tasted something better, seen something better. It inclines to more subtle, more refined, less coarse happiness. So that's a useful thing. So doing things for the sake of merit is fine. Chanting for the sake of brightening the mind is fine. But you understand that's not what will liberate the mind. My favorite list is the 5 spiritual powers, because it's just so easy it's a simple list. but Lord Buddha did say 5 powers lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless. Faith is one of them. So things that you can do just because it lifts your faith, it reminds you that you have faith. It's not a rite or ritual that has no value. Strengthening your faith is one of the powers that leads to nibbana. Strong faith gives rise to energy. A lot of people want to practice, but don't have much energy, So when we lift the faith and we make commitments to do more practice, it gives rise to more energy, much more likely then to get some samadhi, experience samadhi. The other is mindfulness, of course. So we cultivate, everything we do, we try to have mindfulness while we're doing it in postures, and all of our postures. With formal meditation will help the mind to have a more stable quality of mindfulness, or more consistent mindfulness, and then wisdom is the other. So you have to do these things with wisdom, with right intention. So I think things like setting the intention is very important, but let's just review those. Faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, wisdom. When Lord Buddha had realized Nibbana and was reviewing the awesomeness of it, he himself was like, how did I accomplish that? This is amazing. So few beings do. It goes against the current of the world. The other shore, literally, looking back on the conditioned reality. And he saw that those 5 qualities, when cultivated, made much of, lead to the deathless. So we can do things for the purpose of lifting our faith. That's wise. We can do things for the purpose of increasing merit, generating energy. It's wise. But then we do it with mindfulness. And when we have that, strong faith, good energy, consistent mindfulness, some samadhi, then there's a different level of wisdom where you're seeing with clear insight into deeper reality, direct insight, vipassana, and then one can glimpse the deathless. And that's when the practitioner has experience of insight into not self. That's why there's no belief that the rites and rituals will lead to liberation, because a practitioner who has good mindfulness will know what they were contemplating, will know how they were practicing when they had the insight. And they will know that's what leads to insight. Right mindfulness, whether that be contemplating the body as body parts or elements or seeing things arising and ceasing, they will know what they were contemplating, what they were practicing, and they will know. So, ceremonies and rituals might help clarify, stabilize, brighten the mind, but the practice itself is what leads to insight. So,
you were talking of wisdom. Could you clarify a little bit more what you mean by wisdom?
Yes, so on the conventional level, the various practices that we do, we have to do it with wisdom. What does that mean? It means we have the intention to purify the mind. We have the intention to liberate the mind. So we have that right intention. In terms of cultivating wisdom in practice, you want to be noticing 3 characteristics. Probably the easiest is aniccaṃ. So aniccaṃ, dukkhaṃ, anattā. But when you see, so suppose you practice breath meditation to make the mind peaceful. The mind's experiencing some peace, then it comes out of that peace. There's a little bit of thinking. You can then make it your goal in the meditation to notice the cessation of each out-breath, for example. You just notice every breath ceases. You give the mind something to do. It experiences some peace, now it wants to think. Don't get up, continue meditating. Notice the way each in-breath ceases, the way each space between the breath ceases, the way each out-breath ceases, and just give yourself that task of noticing. If the mind isn't that refined, if there's a lot of discursive thought or painful feelings in the heart area, if something has affected the mind, we can make it the task of the meditation to be aware of the way the feelings there change. So you're broadly aware of the in-breath, broadly aware of the out-breath. You might know that there's some grumpiness, you might know that there's some anger, you might know that there's some passion, but you set the intention to notice the way it changes. and it always does. So within your half an hour, 40 minutes, 1 hour of sitting, you will see the mind states move around and change, and the feelings change. So and then you're developing some insight into the cittanupassana, the way mind states change. And then, of course, if you see that clearly, anicca, 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 the sense of self can disappear for a period of time. Small, Ajahn Anan talks about temporary liberations, tatanga vimutti, that if you've seen anicca, 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 a sense of self that identifies with everything, when it really sees that everything is ceasing, will disappear for a period of time. And the mind can have direct experiences of experiencing a body and mind without a sense of self clinging and identifying with it. So, yeah. Dukkha Vedana practice is harder. So, but we notice the way hindrances are oppressive, they oppress the mind. We just notice this is dukkha, Whatever of the 5 hindrances, sensuality, craving for, craving not for, sleepiness, sloth, doubt, and the anxiousness, worry, all those things, there's a feeling component, and it's always unpleasant. So when you keep your precepts, you meditate daily, you practice metta, your mind should get more sensitive, you'll actually notice dukkha more. But you just notice it, and then it's important to incline the mind to happy states, because that's what supports the development of insight. By happy, I don't mean, I mean glad. Incline the mind to glad states. So we use metta a lot. When the mind gets more sensitive and you notice dukkha a lot, you have to cultivate a lot of metta to support yourself through the process of noticing how much dukkha there is. And but the anicca, noticing arising and ceasing, particularly cessation, is a very good way to develop wisdom. So,
I have a question.
Yes.
The second noble truth, abandoning.
Right.
It's not my first language, so I'm just wondering, the word abandoning for me it's got a connotation of pushing, active, pushing it away. The way I practice, I tend to observe whatever happens, whatever comes, let it, the good, the bad and the ugly pretty much, let it come, let it stay for a while and then go.
Yeah.
So I don't interfere, so I don't push anything away, I just observe it and it goes.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I don't. The thing about whether a person can abandon their mind states, there does need to be mindfulness. There does need to be some samadhi. There does need to be some what they call sampajanya, clear comprehension. So it's like, how long have you been practicing? May I ask?
30 years.
Yeah. So, because you have been cultivating for 30 or 40 years, there is something that can observe the mind state. It's like Luang Por Chah gives the analogy of sitting in the chair of the mind, and the guests come in, but you don't let them sit. You don't let them fully occupy the mind, and then they leave by themselves. But after 30 or 40 years, you have something that can take the seat of the mind. You have that presence of mind. A lot of people, particularly beginning meditators, their mind gets invaded by these things and takes on the characteristics of the mind state, and they're lost. And then they remember, oh, that's what I'm trying to meditate. But if you've been doing it for decades, that is correct practice. Just to observe. Luang Por Chah said, he gave an analogy also of a chicken in these coops that they have in northeast Thailand. You don't have to force the chicken to sit down still, but you just don't let it. But you don't let it get away. It moves around a bit, and you're just aware of it as it moves around. Eventually, it will become peaceful. So it's like there's a certain quality of generating clarity and maintaining clarity, and there's also a relaxing into that. So it's like, but you do need to have generated the clarity before one can relax it and practice like you're talking about. In the beginning stages, people do need to try to force themselves to be with the meditation object, and then if you have mindfulness and clear comprehension and some samadhi, you don't need to push anything away. You just maintain that, and you notice the way things fall away by themselves. So, yeah. And I think it's mindfulness that good mindfulness is what it just drops things. Just drops them. You don't have to push them away. You don't pick them up. So it's like just drop it.
That's only on a good day, not always.
Right. Very good. My sister Jane did not have any faith in religion at all, and no particular respect for her bhikkhu brother. And she had a brain tumor that had recurred, and I think with a combination of concern for her only son, probably an assumption that this life is, that you hear that saying sometimes, you only live once. And I'm like, not sure about that. But if you've heard that and if you've kind of taken that on board and you believe it on one level, the idea of leaving this life is terrifying. And so you hold on to dear life. And so she had 10 days not taking fluids or food and stayed alive, kind of appearing from the outside to be sleeping, and the mind was not able to leave the body. In her, I believe in her circumstance, that may have worked to her benefit, because I have several hundred students around the world, and having been teaching for 2 decades, and I asked my tag team to add their merits and prayers and dedications to Jane, and so I think that while she was stuck there for 10 days, not able to move on, we were pouring in merit and brightening things up, and I think she probably had a better outcome than she may have had if she had a quick death. So, but it's interesting to see. I was having some conversations with some people about people who they knew who had easy deaths, peaceful and easy deaths. And they tended to be people who had a spiritual worldview and some faith in an afterlife and some faith in goodness and some kind of sense of going on to something better. Because when your body's very old and full of aches, it's not that difficult to imagine something better. There's a sense of, if it's time to go, it's time to go. And but if a person has a more materialist worldview, and they think this is just their life, and they have one child and they're very attached to the child, it's harder to go. So I'm thinking obviously about the role that death reflection plays in our practice, and it's really important, I think, just to understand that this body will die. One needs to have just accepted that on a fundamental level. Yeah, it's going to die. And then when that's happening, there's not too much of a struggle. One has accepted that. I heard one story of, I think it was a priest's wife, and she nearly died in church, but she came back and she told her husband, I nearly died. I think she had some issue that she was concerned about. And she told her husband, I nearly died. It was so nice. It was so easy, just like slipping off her clothes and going somewhere else. But I've got something to do. And so she came back, and a year later, apparently, she had a shower, and then she knew she was going to die. And she asked her husband to please help her get her underwear on and wipe her body. And she lay down on the bed and she died. It doesn't have to be a difficult. If a person has awareness, mindfulness functioning, and some faith in an afterlife, and it can be that. I heard another story. An old lady had asked her friend to read her favorite Bible verse. She was Christian. Her friend read her the verse. Then she said, I'm a little cold. Can you go and get me my blanket? The lady went to get the blanket. She came back and she died. She'd listened to her favorite Bible verse, and then she just whoop. And I know I know a lady whose father was a close attendant of Luang Por Tate, believed to be an arahant, disciple of Luang Por Man, northeast Thai forest tradition. And he, when he retired, spent more and more time in the temple and was actually having tea with his Ajahn. So he's here and his Ajahn is here. And he puts down his cup of tea and he falls over in the lap of the arahant, dead. So when people have merit, and I asked my teacher if I could fall over in his lap. He said no. He said I had to help with his funeral first. But what a nice way to go, you know. Falling over in the lap of an arahant. I'm a bit big though. I wouldn't want to hurt him. But yeah. And there was a Sri Lankan lady in Melbourne, came to make merit for the 1 year anniversary of her husband's passing. And Ajahn Kalyano noticed, the abbot at Buddha Bodhiwana Monastery, noticed that she had no symptoms or effects of sadness or grief. And it's a bit unusual. I've heard from several people the 1 year point can be a difficult point for many people. That's when they really get it, that the person has gone. And Ajahn Kalyana asked her, you seem cheerful, you seem in a good state. Can I ask you, because he was curious, can I ask you how your husband passed? And apparently she said they were having breakfast and he was drinking tea also. And he said to his wife, oh, there's Devas. He put down his cup of tea and his chin fell on his chest. And he just went with them. So these kind of deaths also possible. If one doesn't have a lot of grasping and clinging, if one is happy to go, willing to go, these kind of things are possible. So I think with Jane, she left home when I was 10. I've lived overseas for 30 years, so we were not close. But when I was a little boy, she bathed me. She changed the sheets on my bed once a week, helping my mum. So there was that, she had benefited me this lifetime. So there was that sense of I want to help her at this difficult crossroads. And I believe she did go to a happy destination. Sukhati, we call in Buddhism, one of the happy realms. So, yeah.
You see her when she was conscious?
A few days before she died, before she became unconscious, she told my mother she didn't want anybody to see her in that state. So I was not allowed. But you know what? I've been thinking about this. I think that may have served us best, because I was able to meditate a lot, and meditate on the beach, and meditate in my quiet room late at night. There was one day I spread metta to her for 2 hours. Now if I was in the room with my grieving relatives and I was encouraging my students around the world to, I was able to get a bit of a team thing happening. So I think that actually worked out okay. I believe we were able to help her. I have some signs of that. And yeah, I think we were on good terms when I think she's now grateful to her bhikkhu brother and his teacher. So, yeah.
Bhante, can you explain about the power of metta?
It's when we were talking a little earlier about how merit brightens the mind. Metta is extremely bright quality. So people who keep sila, people who generate merit through being generous, their minds are bright. When we cultivate metta as a samatha practice, we also understand that the 5 hindrances are dark qualities. So if you're ethical and if you're generous, there's a certain amount of brightness, but the mind is still affected by these things that darken it. If you develop some facility to brighten the mind by picking up goodwill, metta, then the darkness of those hindrances for periods of time is dissipated and the mind becomes very bright. Lord Buddha says in the 11 benefits of Metta Sutta that those who cultivate metta have radiant complexions. So even with an ordinary eye, you can see a person who has metta looks bright. So the devas can also see that, and ghosts also. So you have this. I told Ajahn Thomas here I'd try not to talk about devas and ghosts too much. So I live in Asia, and I'm probably quite Asian in my tendencies. But in Thailand, you often have experiences of people coming to stay in the monastery and something pulling their feet as they're trying to fall asleep. And they tend to think that a ghost is coming to bother them. And that's normally not what is happening. What is happening is the ghost can see that this person has merit and wants some. So they're saying, give me some. Don't be greedy. You have lots. Just give me a little. And it seems to be in that state between waking and sleeping that the mind is sensitive enough or porous enough that beings in parallel realms can make some contact. And so it's a very common experience of legs being pulled in monasteries, but they're not trying to scare people. And sometimes people think, oh, the devas think I need to meditate, and they get up and meditate more. And then they go to sleep and it happens again, more merit. So beings in parallel realms can see the brightness of minds of beings who are ethical and who have metta. And that metta can be, if we dedicate metta to ghosts, for example, so a ghost would normally be experiencing some sadness, some loneliness, some coldness, some hunger, like a poor human being. And when a person spreads loving kindness to them, they will feel some warmth, some fullness, some ease. So it affects other beings in a very positive way. And the Lord Buddha says that devas will protect one if one cultivates loving kindness. So how do they know you're cultivating loving kindness? It's because they can see the brightness. And they can see, oh, that's a lovely being. We have putujanas, kind of worldly beings, and you have Arya Janas, the noble beings, but then you have the Kalyana Jana, lovely beings. So that we all have to train ourselves to be lovely beings as the foundation for being the Arya. But the devas can see who are the lovely beings, because the more time you spend not allowing the dark qualities of the hindrances to obscure the mind, the more radiant your mind is. The more time you spend cultivating metta, the more bright your mind is. And the devas can see that, and the ghosts also. And apparently the beings with wrong view, they don't like it, but it'll causes them to back away. So it has some benefits. Well, Lord Buddha also once described metta as the best weapon when dealing with entities that have ill will, because a lot of brightness of loving kindness comes towards them and then they don't like it. So good to come back to Brisbane and see Buddhist practitioners. Anumodana. I rejoice in your practice, your goodness. I wish you every success. Please keep practicing. If you get a chance, come and visit me in Thailand.